So for anyone new here, I am an anti-theist. An anti-theist, in few words, is someone who believes religion is inherently harmful. There can be a wide array of reasoning for why people consider themselves anti-theists. However, in my own videos discussing why I'm an anti-theist, I've always said that my main reason for believing this is that it's not just that belief in religion is inherently harmful, but that any belief without proof is harmful. I've applied this throughout my time on YouTube, from things to, of course, religion, to GMOs in organic food, to xenogenders, to climate change denial. It's a belief I hold universally, but I feel is most relevant and impactful in the area of religion. The two major reasons I've given for this, in videos I'll link below, is that even when an unfounded belief is held privately, it impacts other people as it informs the actions you take outside of it, and informs the way you perceive others and treat them. While I think a Christian who chooses to not proselytize and not force their beliefs on others is a better person than one who attempts conversions, goes on mission trips, practices street epistemology, or the like, I still fundamentally believe that both of these people are harming themselves and others by holding an unproven belief. The second reason I've stated for this in the past is that unproven beliefs impact the way other opinions and values are formed, which has led to things that are undoubtedly harmful, such as resistance against stem cell research and anti-vax movements, that, while seemingly unrelated to religion, are much more prominent among religious communities. When you remove evidence as a standard for belief, that often extends beyond that of just their religion. I've always kind of believed that this was a standalone position, one that maybe is not unique to me, but I did certainly come to hold over the course of a decade and a half of fascination with religion from someone who's always been an atheist. Even when I was in high school around 5 years ago, I wouldn't say this is a belief that I had fully formed into a coherent idea. It was something that, as a kid, started out with a genuine confusion and admittedly a level of annoyance with people who so vehemently believed something that I could not rationalize. As a middle schooler, I became more interested in religion, but had a bit of a Reddit atheist phase where I kind of brushed every theist off as stupid, and admittedly used my own personal bad experience to lump all Christians into people who threw Bible verses and homophobic slurs at me. I had a bit more thought about it, but more so that if this is how religion makes people act while believing they're righteous, I want no part in it. In high school, one of my best friends was a girl in an evangelical cult, which I made a video about that I'll link below. I was still very much in the more angry and aggressive phase than I am now, admittedly, but I grew more of an interest in why people are religious when I realized that my friend was actually a really smart person who somehow managed to, from my perspective, turn her brain off when it came to religion. After meeting her, and honestly just maturing, I thought a lot more about what it actually is that I don't like about religion, because it wasn't just the people throwing slurs at me because God supposedly hates gay people, and it wasn't just the prominence and the culture that I was surrounded by that kind of irked me, and to be honest, disappointed me to see so many people be a part of something that I thought had no merit. Basically, the point is, my position that belief without proof is intrinsically bad came over a lifetime of trying to rationalize not only why people are religious, but what about it had always bothered me so much. It wasn't something that I learned in a philosophy or history class and went, oh, yeah, that makes sense to me. It was a process. Earlier today, a few hours before writing this script, I was playing a video game and listening to the Crash Course Philosophy playlist as background noise. I admittedly was not paying much attention until a line from the video Anti-Vaxxers, Conspiracy Theories, and Epistemic Responsibility stuck out to me. Quote, "We have an epistemic responsibility only to believe things for which we have evidence, and if you don't have evidence, you're morally obligated to refrain from that belief." This kind of stopped me in my tracks. I had never really heard my views vocalized on an academic level before, and I actually had to do a bit of a double take to make sure I wasn't taking something out of context, but I wasn't. That's what was being discussed, and the person discussing it was WK Clifford. Not only that, but Clifford believes that there is, quote, "no such thing as a private belief," citing the same things that I have in the past, that not only do your beliefs affect how you proceed to act in your life, but that essentially, when you remove evidence as a standard for belief on one thing, you become philosophically inconsistent, and as such have no standard for belief in other areas, something that I cited previously regarding the higher level of conspiratorial thinking surrounding medicine in particular being so prominent among religious communities in comparison to other groups. For a bit of background, WK Clifford was a 19th century philosopher and mathematician. He wrote a book on this very subject titled The Ethics of Belief. One thing that he's most known for is a thought experiment in his book, often called Clifford's Ship. The thought experiment goes as follows. There's a ship owner who wants to sell tickets to make a transatlantic trip. The ship is in bad shape and hasn't been inspected. It's definitely not safe. However, the ship owner talks himself into genuinely believing it's seaworthy in order to justify taking his trip. The ship obviously sinks, and the owner collects insurance money and gets a pat on the back, as no one is aware of the reality of the situation and what he convinced himself of. Most people would agree that the ship owner is at fault for the death of the passengers. However, Clifford goes beyond that, stating that not only is he guilty if the ship sinks, but he'd be guilty even if it made it to land. Quote, "He was guilty of accepting a belief without sufficient evidence, and whether that actually leads to harm or not, he has still done wrong epistemically and morally." The general consensus is that regardless of if a belief manifests as material harm or an active attempt to spread it, that your belief dictates how you act, the choices you make, and even unintentionally can spread to others. Hank in the Crash Course video gives the example of sexism spreading even when not intentionally, but I'll give my own example of this as well as a personal perspective just to give another one. And also, this is not meant to proselytize about being vegan. I'm not even vegan. This is just a good example, I think. So, a kid grows up eating meat because their parents believe eating is morally acceptable. That child is influenced by the parent to believe eating meat is morally acceptable as well, and as such partakes in it. Most parents don't constantly talk about how eating meat is okay, but because that belief informs their actions, those actions can influence others to hold the same belief, and while it may not appear harmful on the surface, that belief is ultimately a causal factor in the emission of the vast majority of greenhouse gases. The belief was never outwardly expressed vocally, and what most people would consider a private belief. However, since it influences the action of the person holding it, it is no longer private. Since all beliefs have the potential to affect others, Clifford argued that we have a moral and epistemic responsibility to only believe things for which we have evidence. I personally stand by this thought process wholeheartedly. I do not agree with the idea that there are private beliefs, whether you outwardly express them or they simply influence the way you act. In regards to Clifford, he's propositioning that to hold beliefs that are lacking in evidence is morally and epistemically wrong. This is honestly my position as well. I often get comments stating that I should want to ban religion if I believe it's harmful as an anti-theist, or simply assuming that I do want that, but that is not at all what I believe. Something being illegal and being immoral are not necessarily equals. I believe that stealing from massive corporations like Walmart is wholly morally acceptable, but legalizing that would cause a host of issues. I do believe that riots and violent resistance are sometimes necessary in the face of injustice. That does not mean that I think burning cars should be legalized. I believe that people have a moral obligation to hold beliefs that they can back up, to not rely on faith, and to be consistent within their beliefs. I can and do place moral judgment on people who reject that idea, even if I think that moral judgment leans less or more extreme depending on how those beliefs are expressed. Ultimately, whether you choose to be religious or not is not my choice to make for you, but it is one that my own philosophy and moral standard rejects and will place a judgment on. I think it's everyone's duty as a person to assess the value and evidence to their beliefs honestly, and to hold all their beliefs to the same standard of evidence. And it's extremely refreshing to hear something that I spent over a decade coming to understand about my own moral beliefs reflected by mainstream philosophy, in honestly a much more articulate way than I'm able to express myself. I'd recommend you guys all go check out that book as well as the Crash Course video that I linked below, as obviously that influenced a lot of this video. But thank you for watching. Ha det! I stare at the populace in prayer.